Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Marissa Lather, the Salesforce Marketing Manager at Perficient, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar on how to build a successful community with engaging content and how you, the listeners, can use this story and our experts' knowledge and advice to create a strategic content strategy for your own community. The audio for today's conference should be coming through your computer speakers. Please ensure your speakers are turned on and the volume is up. If you are experiencing any audio issues, try refreshing or reloading your browser. Alternatively, you can join with the Flash Player version located in the Settings menu. Look for the cogwheel symbol on the left side of your screen. We are recording today, and we will email you the information on how to access this after the session. Time permitting, we will answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please type those into the chat box. In a moment, I'll hand it over to our speakers, but first, let me give you a quick overview of Perficient. Perficient is the leading digital transformation consulting firm serving Global 2000 and enterprise customers throughout North America. With unparalleled information technology, management consulting, and creative capabilities, Perficient and its Perficient Digital Agency deliver vision, execution, and value with outstanding digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions. We have a broad network of locations across the U.S., as well as offshore facilities in India, China, and Mexico. Founded in 1997, we're a public company with more than 3,000 employees. We formed strategic partnerships with each of the major technology vendors and also have dedicated solution and industry practices. Our team helps brands use Salesforce to accelerate business innovation and transform their customer experience. With over 3,000 Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, Community Cloud, and Force.com engagements, our clients have transformed their business to be more engaged, efficient, and relevant with those they serve. With the unique blend of creative firepower, business consulting skills, and our deep technology expertise, we enable brands to put the customer at the center of their business. Okay, like I said, please type your questions into the chat box if you have any. And then finally, a little background on our speakers. Stewart Florsheim is the VP of Content Enablement at Vlocity, Inc., where he's responsible for the user documentation, training materials, and the company's online community. Prior to working at Vlocity, Stewart worked at Canandy, Inc., where he was the VP of Marketing before he became Senior VP of Content Development. Stewart also led other content development teams at the Ask Group, Intuit, and Advent Software. Andrew Smith is the Solution Architect for Perficient with a specialization in UI and UX, where he is responsible for creating state-of-the-art communities including Vlocity, Hulu, and Intuit. He is focused on modern design and development techniques for over a decade to complete a variety of projects in Salesforce, Lightning Communities, front-end development, website design and development, and UI UX consultation. Next up, we have a couple of polls here. We'll take a minute to answer these. The first question, do you currently manage a community? Give everybody a moment or two to put a response in there. It's looking like more people are not managing a community, but we do have several people that are. Moving on to the next question. What platform are you using for your community? You could also share what platform you're looking at or interested in learning more about. And this could be an owned platform or something different. I'm getting a couple of responses in here. Seems like Salesforce is really dominating this, so you're in the right place. All right, last poll. Who is the audience for your community? Do you tend to focus more on customer, partner, or employee communities? We've got several responses coming in here. It looks like customer is number 1, partner is number 2, and employee is number 3. Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stewart to share a little bit more about Vlocity and their goals for the new customer community. Stewart?
Thanks very much, Marissa, and welcome everybody. I'm so glad you could join us today. So just a little bit about Vlocity. Vlocity is the fastest growing industry cloud company and also the fastest growing company on the Salesforce App Exchange. We produce omni-channel applications for 5 industries: communications, health, insurance, government, and energy. Now a bit about our community. Vlocity's original community was built on Visualforce. We wanted to take advantage of some of the benefits of the Salesforce Lightning templates, such as easy development, easy maintenance, a more modern look and feel, the ability to easily include new features such as groups, answers, and a leaderboard, and also scalability. In fact, we're using the new community now as a foundation for developing a new partner portal and a new sales enablement portal. And the goals for the new community. We want to build basically one portal for all client and partner-facing resources, including our documentation, our knowledge base, Vlocity University, and our process library, which includes our business templates. We want to establish federated search across all repositories with the ability to filter based on the repository. We want to set up single sign-on between the community and Vlocity University, so when people click on the Vlocity University button, they will go directly into the university as their profile is set up in the community. We also want an improved case deflection informed by all of the relevant content on the community. In the original community we just had case deflection based on the content in the knowledge base, but now we actually offer all the content that's available on the community. And we also want to set up a best-in-class engaging experience with enhanced collaboration features, including groups, ideas, answers, and our knowledge base. And I'll talk a little bit more about all those features later on in the presentation. Over to you, Andrew.
Hey, thanks, Stewart. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. So most of my experience over the last 12 or 13 years is based in user interface and user experience design, which is also known as UI UX, which probably most of you have heard before. And every single tool or software is used by people or users. And then knowing that, I approach every single project from a user experience or user-first standpoint. And the Vlocity Success community is no exception. And everything that I'll be talking about will be coming from the perspective of user experience. And one of our major goals, as Stewart said, for the community was to make a modern and clean design. But what does that mean? It means using contemporary design treatments and tropes to lead users' eyes and clicks in a specific direction or to a specific location. Whether that's somewhere the users know they want to navigate to, or it's somewhere that we want to direct them and they didn't know they want to go beforehand. It also means having something that's aesthetically pleasing for any screen size or device type. We wanted users to not only be able to help themselves find answers across the site, but we wanted them to come back with looking for answers to new questions that they might have, or to help other users answer questions as well. And we did that latter thing that I said partially through community involvement, which I'll get a little bit into later. But first, I want to talk about the content accessibility. So one of our major goals or major components of this project was to enable users to find answers on their own without having to get in touch with Vlocity, i.e. creating a case, which of course costs time and money for Vlocity. So avoiding that and enabling users to self-help is critical. And one of the major ways we did that was solidifying a navigation menu. One component of doing this was ironing out that navigation that you can see in this screenshot here at the top. We ended up with a fairly simple navigation without any type of drop downs or second level items underneath. Also, we did this through callouts on the home page, which you can see here. There are 4 main what we're calling cards near the top of the home page, and these lead users to the 4 main sections as we see it, which is documentation, knowledge base, process library, and Vlocity University. And then there are also important but slightly less important callouts to the ideas and group sections of the site, which I'll get a little bit more into later. And on a side note, one of the major aspects of any design is deciding what elements are more important than other elements. It's critical to have certain elements that have more visual presence than others, or you would just end up essentially with a grid of links with no single item that's more important than its counterpart. You can do this through a number of different ways. Well, figuring out what's more important you can do in a number of different ways. You can gather the knowledge from power users, from user groups, or from analytics, or any combination thereof. We also know that people will often search for an answer before navigating around via clicks, which I certainly do myself. So we made the search bar really prevalent on the home page, as well as every page on the interior. And this search here is a federated search, which will scour everything related to the community, including the Vlocity University that's up there on that rightmost card, which is an off-site learning management system, or an LMS. So now that users are able to access the content that they're looking for easily, they need to be able to visually comprehend what they're looking at, as well as have it be an enjoyable user experience, even with a lot of text on the page. There are quite a few sections of the Vlocity Success community that are heavy on content. As you can see in these 2 screenshots here of the knowledge base and the Vlocity process library. So these 3 sections, well, there are 3 main sections that have a lot of content in the Success community. And the most popular of those is the process library, which is the screenshot on the right here. And another is the documentation, which has over 2,000 articles. And another is the knowledge base, which is the screenshot on the left here. And making large chunks of content or text into something that's comprehensible, accessible, and enjoyable is really never an easy task. And one of the ways that we did it was to ensure that the text has a considerable amount of breathing room or white space around it, as well as consistent, good section breaks, which you can see here in both screenshots. Those darker headlines really break off those sections. And having great content layout will help users stay engaged on the community, as well as find the answers that they're looking for within those individual articles. And if users were not able to find what they were looking for from the plethora of content in documentation, process library, and knowledge articles like I just spoke about, we wanted to enable them to gather answers from other community users. We did this by leveraging some of Salesforce's tools. One was questions, which Vlocity is calling answers in their community. This section enables users to ask questions, vote on questions, and answer questions, all using the power of chatter. This section also has a leaderboard, which is a type of gamification that helps user adoption as well as community involvement, which you can see on the right-hand side of this rightmost screenshot. Another section for community help is groups, where users can form their own groups, which you can see in this screenshot below the bullet points here. They can form their own groups, whether they're public or private, or they can join existing groups of other people that are either in a similar industry or share a similar interest. For example, registrants of a workshop, for example. And another section that enables community involvement is ideas. And This section enables users to voice their opinions on where Vlocity should direct their efforts for future developments. And here, users can vote on ideas as well as comment on them, and of course, they can create the ideas there as well. And then there's also Chatter, which is, of course, powering a couple of the things that I mentioned before, but there's also Chatter that is enabled on individual user profiles for directly messaging users, and it's also enabled on knowledge articles, which enables users to follow individual knowledge articles to get updates every time the article is updated, as well as comment on it and have conversations below the article. And community collaboration is a really effective path for users to help themselves and other users before moving on to create a case. And on the topic of self-help and case deflection, which were a couple of the major components we kept in mind when designing this community, our goal was to encourage users to find the answers that they were looking for, make those answers accessible, or be able to ask a question and leverage the community to get those answers they were looking for. Then their last option would be to create a case for Vlocity to assist with. So all the methods that I mentioned previously enable users for self-help, which is a form of case deflection. And if users do go as far as creating a case, they are put into one of Vlocity's tools called OmniScript. And OmniScript is a case creation tool that has a custom built-in case deflection. Users will begin to fill out their case form, and then they'll be shown search results using the federated search that I mentioned previously, which will hopefully provide answers that they weren't able to find before creating the case. And then worst case scenario, they can move on to create that case. Not only was one of our major goals to have great case deflection for the community, but it's almost a side effect of having a good design and enabling users to find what they're looking for. And another one of the major goals or major reasons that Stewart mentioned before for why Vlocity wanted to move to the community cloud was so that they were on the right platform that was getting a lot of attention and a lot of growth in general. Salesforce's Lightning community was definitely that platform that enabled them to not only have the most modern technology, but technology that was definitely going to scale in the future and even has potential of scaling right now, which Stewart had also mentioned before, that we're using this as a basis for a partner-specific community. And with that, I will have Stewart take it from here and talk a little bit more about Vlocity's information design.
Great, thanks very much, Andrew. That was a great context for the whole architecture of the community. So I'll do a little bit of a deeper dive now into the content and information design. So this is a very high level view of Vlocity's information design. Vlocity's core content is designed to be as complementary as possible. So like Andrew said, we have our documentation, over 2,000 articles. The documentation describes how the product is intended to function. It's mostly reference information. It includes content like user guides, developer documentation, and release notes. Our training content is designed to get users up and running as quickly as possible. From the context of the community, we of course have access to Vlocity University, where we have our e-learning. Vlocity also offers instructor-led training. And then we have our knowledge base, which is knowledge that comes from, quote unquote, the real world. It comes from the support organization when they solve cases. So it includes case solutions, troubleshooting information, best practices, and tips. So Vlocity's goal with the content is to give customers and partners access to as much relevant content as possible when and where they need it. So of course they can always access the web where the community is from their application or whatever they're on the web, they can access the community. It is a private community, so it's only available to customers, partners, and employees. The core content that is produced by Vlocity is our documentation of Vlocity University content, the knowledge base, and the software we produce, which is the Vlocity process library. We also, of course, welcome and encourage content from the community. Like in this case, I'm talking about the partners and customers who come onto the community, and that content comes in the context of the groups, which, like Andrew said, are like special interest groups that people can either start or join. They could do it in the context of either setting up a public or a private group. If it's a public group, anybody could join it. If it's a private group, people have to, quote unquote, knock on the door, and then the owner of the group can let them in. We have our Answers Forum, which is our Q&A forum, and we have our Ideas channel, where people can enter their recommendations for product enhancements and new features, and that gets routed directly to Vlocity's product managers, who can then comment on the ideas that have been presented. Vlocity employees can also create and join groups. They can participate in the Answers channel, and they can also respond to ideas, both in terms of giving like a text response, and they can also decide to upvote or downvote ideas as well. So all that said about the glory of content, and developing good content, and basically gathering good content also has its challenges. I'm just going to talk about a few of them. One is harnessing the universe of relevant internal content. At Vlocity, we have a lot of content in many internal repositories. So a potential solution, short of mining the information, which would be a very, very arduous task, I often solicit relevant content, and then I acknowledge employees when they provide it. So, for example, when we started our knowledge base, I did set up a competition, and when people hit a certain number, I think 10 contributions, then I sent them a gift certificate. So, it doesn't really matter if you have to beg, borrow, and steal. In the context of Vlocity, we just have a lot of relevant content out there, and one of my challenges is to make sure that we get the appropriate content onto the community so our customers and partners have access to it. Gathering content from the community is also somewhat of a challenge. A couple of solutions there is to offer engaging channels that complement each other. We do have that in the context of the Answers groups and Ideas. They're all collaboration channels, but they all serve a slightly different purpose. And also, like Andrew said, gamification is very effective. We just have a leaderboard right now that's attached to our Answers channel, but that has been a very effective tool to get people to contribute to the answers, either to respond to the answers or to ask questions, or again to vote on them. And also curating content is a challenge. In the case of Vlocity, we have 3 releases per year across most of our verticals. So a couple of solutions here. If your company supports multiple releases, you may need to develop processes or find technologies that manage versioning. So if you look at the example on the right, this is a knowledge-based article. When people create them, they can choose the applicable version. So if you do that from the get-go, then you don't have to worry about always making sure that content is relevant just for one particular release. And also, you can use collaboration features where you can to capture user feedback. We also do that in the context of our knowledge base. So if people find content that they really like, or if it's out of date or something like that, they can respond in the context of the knowledge base article, and that gets sent directly to the author of the article. So the bottom line here is that content is king, or content is queen. And just a few main points to keep at the top of your mind here. The most important thing, I think, with content is you want to keep it relevant, you want to keep it fresh, and you want to keep it current. And you also want to make sure that you solicit content from all the experts at your disposal, be the experts employees, customers, or partners. So just a few stats that I want to point out in terms of the success of our community. Our community has actually only been live for a couple of months, but the early trends, I think, look very positive. One of the main goals of the site is case deflection, because that's how we encourage self-help, but it also helps us save money as a company. So case deflection has been still relatively low, but it's absolutely trending up. It's been trending up on average about 50% over prior months. So again, there's a pretty low base level right now, but I see it trickling up every single month. I mean, again, just for a couple of months, but the trends look very, very positive. So that's very encouraging. And also, Vlocity has had a lot of visitors over the last couple of months. We've had over 9,000 users. The users do keep coming back, and the users have logged close to 32,000 sessions. So that's, those are pretty encouraging stats for us right now. And as far as the content goes, the most popular content, I think Andrew mentioned this before, is the Vlocity process library, where people can download business templates, our documentation, and our knowledge base. And as far as the organic collaboration goes, so far people have formed 16 groups over the last couple of months. These have been formed. Some of them have been formed by Vlocity people, but a lot of them have been formed by our partners and customers as well. So that's an encouraging sign. And I think well over 18 ideas have been submitted by our customers and partners so far. So with that, Marissa, I will turn it back over to you for Q&A.
Yes, guys, that was great. Thank you so much to our speakers and also our listeners for being here. We're going to go ahead and give you a few minutes to open up the call for questions. So go ahead and type any questions you have into the chat box, and we actually have a few that I can run by you guys. Are you ready? Okay.
Yeah.
The first question is, how long did it take to get your community up and running?
Oh boy, Andrew, I can't recall the exact start date, but I think it took us about 3 months to get the community up and running. Does that jive with your recollection?
Yeah. Give or take a week. Yeah, that sounds accurate.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question here is, how has your team reacted to the new content? Or to the new community, excuse me.
You mean the internal team at Vlocity? Do you think
yeah.
Yeah. So far the feedback internally has been great. I mean, people love it. I've been trying to promote it as much as possible internally. Every chance I get, I promote it. Sometimes I promote it to prospects. So salespeople call on me to give tours of the community. We also promote it a lot to our customers. So internally, it's been very popular. People love having this as a forum, and so far externally, whenever I show it to customers, they're very impressed because it makes us look like a really big company. So far, very, very positive feedback, both internally and also from our customers and partners.
Okay, great. Here's another one. Are there any best practices for managing groups that require the user to knock on the door or request membership? Yeah, so that's a really good question. When we first launched groups, and let me know, like I spoke to Andrew about this at length, like we were trying to figure out if we should let people request to form a group, in which case the request would ostensibly come to me, and then I could decide whether or not we would allow the group to be formed, because we didn't really know what was going to come our way. But we just decided to leave that open, and we just let anybody form groups. I mean, I do monitor it to make sure that everything is on the up and up, but so far it's been very, very positive. People have been forming groups. They're all totally, appropriate, and the conversations are appropriate. As far as best practices go, on the site, on the groups page itself, I do have, it's the only place where I have like a page that explains some of the best practices around groups. And some of the best practices include how to manage the groups, and for example, making sure that that you keep the group lively, that you generate conversations. So I think one of the things that people who manage groups have to keep in mind is that this is it's basically a chatter group. I think of this chatter on steroids, and you just basically have to keep that group active and lively. But again, there's I have a whole page on best practices that people can take a look at once they're on the groups page of our community. Okay, great. Here's another question. Have you any metrics on how customers have responded to the new community resource, as in support, deflection, and so on?
Yeah, so I showed some of those metrics as far as support, as far as case deflection goes. So it's like it is trending up. Again, we just had this out for a couple of months, but like every month, it's been showing like an increase in numbers, and it's trending up about 50% month over month from the previous months. So that's of course very encouraging, and of course the usage stats are very positive right now. So there is that. So there are those metrical. There are those metrics we can take a look at, and then besides that, we have other maybe softer metrics we could look at, like in terms of the number of people who come in and ask questions, people who offer ideas. And people who just come in to search and to find answers. So we have metrics around all of that.
Okay, we've got one more here. Any advice for addressing internal resistance or refusal to adopt the community concept?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I saw that one, and I was just thinking about it as Stewart was talking. And I think really, what you really have to do is get those people together, maybe not all at once, depends on how many there are, or maybe a speaker for all those people, and really listen to why there is resistance and why they're not adopting it. And it always boils down to a user experience issue. And there's never a simple solution for this. There's never a catch-all, oh, do this and people will start to use it. You have to really listen to individual concerns, because every tool and every piece of software is different. And every group of people using it is different as well. So you have to figure out where those pain points are and figure out how to alleviate those pain points as well. So I think great question, but the answer is kind of complex. You have to listen really well, I think, is really what it boils down to.
And then based on the Vlocity experience, I had a hard time interpreting the question, because the Vlocity, the reception was just so positive. In fact, the CEO was the first person behind it, and he kept on saying, "When is it going to be out? When is it going to be out?" So the Vlocity experience has been extremely supportive, because the company understands that self-help is very important, and getting our resources out to help our customers be successful is critical to the company's success. So at Vlocity, there was absolutely no resistance. There was just a lot of encouragement. I think maybe a related question is whether or not a community should be public or private, because that's often a question that comes up. It's a little bit of a different question, but it is somewhat tangential. At Vlocity, we decided to keep it private. We didn't really have too much debate about that, because we're still, basically in startup mode, and so we want to keep, if our content is basically proprietary, so we still want to keep it somewhat under wraps. But at some point, I imagine that we might be a little bit more open, like Salesforce. Like Salesforce community is available to everybody. At Vlocity, we're not quite there yet, but at some point, I imagine that we will be.
Okay, we've got a couple more here. What roles were represented on your implementation team? And this could actually be for both of you.
Yeah, so on the content side, on the content side, I solicited content from all the relevant people at Vlocity. I work very closely with my documentation and training team. And of course, I worked hand in hand with our support manager, because we see this as being also a support site. So from the Vlocity point of view, there was a lot of collaboration and input from the content folks, as well as the support and services side of the house. Yeah,
and on the Perficient side, it was so I took on the role of business analyst, a developer, as well as a designer. And then I also worked in tandem with a developer as well as a project manager on our side.
Okay. Here's another one. Who in your organization responds to the ideas that are submitted?
Yeah, so at Vlocity, I organized the ideas around, it's mostly organized around our verticals. In fact, most of the content on the site is somewhat related to the 5 verticals that we support. And at Vlocity, each of those verticals has a separate product manager. So I set up a queue such that whenever an idea comes in, it goes directly to that product manager, and I ask them to try to respond within a couple of days.
Okay. Do people have to make a formal request before they can start a group? We kind of already covered that a little bit.
Yeah, no, like I said before, we didn't, I was thinking, at my last company I did it that way, but we decided to let it go here, and I think it's actually, it's actually worked out pretty well. So.
How often are you creating new content?
Our content is, created all the time, so we always have new knowledge-based articles. We always have new documentation. The documentation is updated at least twice a week, sometimes more often. And then we also add a fair amount of new content to Vlocity University. So the content is refreshed, maybe not on a daily basis, but I would say, easily across the whole community, 3 or 4 times a week across the different repositories.
Okay. Here's a question for Andrew. What open communities has Perficient built so that people can get in and view the UI UX?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Got a couple that come to mind, but
yeah, go ahead. I think probably one of the ones you'll mention is OpenTable, which is a great one. There's also Hulu, and which ones did you have listed there, Marissa?
I think OpenTable definitely jumped to mind because it had 2 different audiences. So it had kind of 2 different components that had to be unified but still separate. So that really stands out to me. I think some of the support communities, like you mentioned, Hulu, Activision, Ancestry. So what we can do is we'll post a blog about that on our website. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, great idea. Most of the ones that I have been working on are not public, unfortunately.
Yeah. We've got another one. Who in your organization responds to the questions that are submitted?
Right. That's another good question. One of the things I wanted to do when we set up the community was I wanted to make sure that it stays as active and vital as possible. So I sort of set up monitors across these different channels. So like I take a look at the groups to make sure that they stay active. I monitor ideas every so often just to make sure that the product managers are responding. As far as the answers channel, I opened that up to several different people. The person who's really, quote unquote, in charge of, making sure that the questions are answered is a support organization. But I also solicited support from my team, the documentation and training team, because they have a lot of product knowledge, and I thought this would also be a good way for them to see what kind of questions our users have. So the official monitor of the answers channel is the support organization, but I've also reached out to other people who I feel might have responses or might also learn by seeing the questions that our customers and partners have.
Okay. We've got one more here. You mentioned the leaderboards. How has gamification been received amongst the team? And are you using it in any other ways?
Well, at Vlocity, the only gamification that we have on the site right now is associated with the Answers channel. And I've done this before, and gamification works because people see their names, people see their name in lights, and we also give awards. So when people hit certain levels, like 250, 500, and 1,000 points, we send them gifts. So I think gamification has been extremely positive in terms of the community. We're also thinking about setting up separate gamification on our learning management system for the same reason. But I think it works because people can see their name in lights, and people also get rewarded, with a gift, and they also get recognition. So, for example, if a partner shows a lot of interest and has a lot of points on the leaderboard, I think that's also good PR for the partner, right? So I think it serves a lot of benefits for the people who participate in terms of recognition and reward.
Okay, we've got one last question here. We can end on this one, and this is to both of you. What are you most excited about in this community?
Andrew, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. No, I think that's a great question, and I think my answer is going to be kind of expected, which is really The thing that I've loved seeing and hearing is when Stewart brings statistics of showing that people are using the site and they're staying on the site. That means I did my job well, and it's exciting to see people, you know, using it and enjoying it. So I think that's the major thing for me. And I love communities that have a lot of interaction. So people creating groups, people asking questions, people answering questions, people wanting to get higher up on the leaderboard. All of those things show engagement to the community, and that always makes me happy.
And the thing that gets me most excited, like I think is when I, like when I first kicked off this project with Andrew. I mean, like I said, that the most important, elements on the site is the content, and I really want the content to stand out. So I don't want a site that has a lot of, multimedia components or anything like that. I want the site to really, focus and underlie the content that is really the key part of the community. So, working with Andrew, we were able to come up with a design that really focuses on the content. So it's a very, very clean site. Again, focus on content in the different repositories. So the part that probably gets me most excited is that when I look at the community, I feel like it's visually attractive, but I also get a sense of the importance of the content and also what content is most important.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up, guys. It looks like that's it for questions. So if we happen to miss a question, we'll reach out with an answer in the near term. I'd invite everybody to follow Perficient's team online as we have new information added daily. You can visit Perficient.com and click on the Insights tab for our blogs, white papers, and upcoming webinars. And all of these links up here link you to all of the great Salesforce content that we have. Thank you very much for your time today, and that concludes our webinar.